Right, now recording. Basically, the problem was I guess it wasn't really my fault. The particular distro that I had been using on my computer at my desk, which was KDE Neon, they decided to push a so-called security update, which, for one reason or another, I think it was the Windows Manager had the wrong version, or like some problem happened, and basically I only had Bash access to my terminal, which of course, you kind of need the GUI. Unfortunately, I can't do everything in Bash. I've not yet transcended to that level where I can do absolutely everything in Bash. But I basically had to back it up, wipe the thing, and install Mint, which, is fine. It's fine.
These things happen.
Hmm?
These things happen.
These things happen. So yeah, this week there's going to be a buttload of videos uploaded, because it's going to be from last week as well as this week. But yeah, the YouTube channel, I will post links to it once the videos are sort of going up, but if you go to youtube.com and you search for Nick Moore Master, Mohawk might work? Maybe? Yeah, there it is. Nick Moore Mohawk. This is the channel. That's little Pixel Nick. There we go. And these are all my, you'll notice nothing's been uploaded for this class yet, so there you go. If you're interested in all, I have an extensive back catalog of courses which I have taught previously, including some meme videos, which students made, which are hilarious. So yeah, that's the long and short of it. It's a lot of videos of me in front of a screen, except for the pandemic, where it's a lot of pictures of me doing live streams. Yeah, that's the YouTube channel. 1.3, yeah, nice. Cool, I haven't seen that in a while. All right. It's nice having a YouTube channel and like literally not caring about the analytics even a little bit, because then you don't have, you have no emotional investment in it whatsoever. So it's like, oh, I'm up to 1.3. I don't actually care, so it's you can enjoy it more. There's something deep and philosophical about life in there somewhere. So, please get your Apache server started. I'm probably going to wreck my voice. I had a cold over the weekend, so I really had hoped that the amplification equipment worked, but it is what it is, I suppose. I will be submitting a service ticket. Seems like the internet is slow today. Was this also the case, I know this was kind of the case towards the end of my last class. Have you guys noticed the internet is slow today? Yeah. Too many students torrenting movies. That's got to be it, right? One, two, three, four, five. There we go. I like to do this joke that my password is 12345, but some days I know that if I say that at the same time as I'm typing my password, I won't type my password correctly, So I can't always pull the joke off with that kind of level of polish, you know? Man, the internet is slow. That's okay. We can build our own internet with Apache. Goodness gracious me, this is taking some time.
It's not one more questions you do, just like,
So remind me where we left off. Had we talked about the double equals versus triple equals in PHP specifically? No? Okay. That's as good a place to start as any. So, PHP. Today in class we'll be going over various things that are important for you to know about PHP, how it contrasts with the other languages that you've learned. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time reviewing the syntax. By this point, you folks should be able to pick up the syntax relatively quickly. This is not your first nor even your second programming language, right? So instead we are going to focus on the semantic differences, not the syntactic differences. Weak typing. This is a concept which is familiar from JavaScript, but we must review it because it has particular implications in PHP. In JavaScript, you could probably program most of your JavaScript course without really having to worry too much about weak typing. It's like every once in a while, if something's not quite working the way you expect it to, try the other one and see if it works better. That's the level you were at in Java, or JavaScript, pardon me. Here in PHP, weak typing bears its fangs almost immediately. Without too much, within a few classes of now, we are going to be discussing how to retrieve inputs from incoming data packets. In order to process that operation successfully, you must know the difference between weak and strong equality, and you must use that to pick out one of a few different return types from a particular function called the filter input function, which we are going to use extensively, as that is the safe way to gather input in PHP. I don't even want to show you the non-safe way of doing it, but we will eventually because you need to know. So, if we all have our Apache server running, please open up VS Code. Open folder 2, the XAMPP directory on your C drive, if you're on one of these. Go to htdocs, select folder. Create a new folder, call it week 3. Week 3. There you go. Oh, that's a file. What am I doing? Delete that. Delete. Delete. New folder. Week 3. There we go. New file in the third folder. Example1.php. There we go. So, does anybody recall what we need to type here in order to put us in PHP mode?
Question mark, open PHP, I don't want the exact syntax.
Yes. But that thing,
that thing, you know?
Yeah. that thing, right there. And then we need to close it off as well. And just to recall, what is our print? How do we print things? Echo. Very good. Echo. Hello. World. Comma in there for niceness. So, to access our PHP file, localhost colon 1080 / week 3. That brings up our index page of all of the things in this folder. Click on example1.php, load the resource, and there is our hello world. Quick review.
Print also works.
Does it now? Yeah. I'm going to keep using Echo though. So this kind of comes down, this particular issue is, it comes down to the manner in which PHP was developed. So PHP is a language that came about largely due to volunteer effort. It is open source software of the highest kind. While PHP, from a design standpoint, hates overloading of its operators, it's absolutely fine with there being a gazillion ways of doing any particular thing. Basically, how it worked was when some developer was using PHP, he or she thought of PHP, wow, it's really stupid that we have to use echo instead of print. So, in goes print. The thing is, you have to be careful that it's not doing something slightly different from what you think it is. And I'm going to be using PHP classic constructs wherever possible, but just know that in PHP, there's literally 5 or 6 ways to do anything that I'm showing you. Make sense? I can't show you everything. I will only show you what I show you. So, fine. So let's take an interesting example here. I say that we have weak typing. One of the classic examples of these is false and 0. Echo false equals 0. Let's see what that runs. Interesting. That doesn't look like a true to me. What happens if we invert the equality? We get nothing at all. Very strange. Boolean literals have weird string interpretations. Under the hood, it has to do with the fact that true is defined as any non-zero value, and false is defined as 0. This is going to come back on us again a bit later on, but essentially, false is being printed as an empty string, true is being printed as the integer 1. If we want to get around this, does anybody remember ternary statements? Did they ever show you ternaries?
Yes.
Yes. So ternary statement. true, colon, false. And now we get what we expect. Quick review of ternary statements. A ternary statement is essentially an inline if statement. You have your if conditional right there. The question mark is what makes it a ternary statement. You then have one of two expressions selected, either a true, the first one is the true branch, the second one is the false branch. Pardon me. This is an expression, so you can drop it in wherever you like. And they can't. You must have the false branch. A ternary statement is not allowed to do nothing on false. So you have to have something in there. At least classically, that's how it's defined. It also kind of makes the form a lot more compact. So if you're the type of person who's like, oh man, I want to do just this simple little if thing, but I don't want to occupy 5 lines of code with it. Like if you're the type of person who tries to minimize the number of lines of code you have to write, ternary statements are excellent. Any questions? So, okay, so false is equal to 0. How about null? You might expect null to come out that way. So, we have false, 0, null. How about an empty string? That also comes out true. So false, 0, null, empty string. And just for fun, let's test a couple more, or one more particularly. How about an empty array, or an empty list? That comes out true as well. Empty array. Under non-strict equality, all 5 of these values test as equal to each other. Not true under strict equality. But yes, under non-strict equality, these are all interchangeable. And that's particularly interesting when you get to like these two, right? But yeah, if you don't believe me. Oh, interesting. Some of them do, some of them don't. So false equates to all of these. 0 does not equate to this one. Maybe 0 doesn't equate to empty string. Let's see. Does empty string. How about null? Yep, null equates there. Yep. So null equates to these ones, but it's interesting. So I personally hate weakly typed languages because you get statements in them which violate basic laws of logic. So one of the very most basic laws of logic is what's called transitivity, which is if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, that should imply that A is equal to C. Right? Make sense? So, in this case, if 0 is equal to false, and false is equal to empty array, it should therefore imply that 0 is equal to the empty array. But this is not the case, so transitivity does not hold for weak equality in PHP. It also does not hold for weak equality in JavaScript. So, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Equality should follow the same rules that equality does in formal mathematics, but here we are. It is the case, though, with strict equality. So let me show you something here. Let me show you the PHP documentation. php.net. Oh man, terrible. So, when you want to know what something does in PHP, my recommendation is that before you Google it, before you go to Stack Overflow, and before you consult the accursed chatbot, I recommend, if it would load, there we go, consulting the PHP documentation first. I find it to be the best and fastest way to find the information you need to use a function. So, consider the following function. Filter input. Filter input is a function that we will use to acquire data from incoming packets in the coming weeks. Notice the return type here. This is a list of all of the input types. Colon here, that means that's the return type of the function. You can see the return type is, quote, mixed. If it's mixed, then what is it a mixture of? Value of the requested variable on success. False if the filter fails, or null if the variable name, if the variable is not set. So that gets interpreted. If the variable that you were looking for was not actually in the incoming packet, you get null. If the value of the variable incoming did not meet the criteria you set out for it, you get false. These criteria include things like, please validate that this is an integer. Please validate that this is a double. Please validate that this is a Boolean. Please validate that this string does not contain an XSS attack. Further, you get the value of the requested variable on success. And the value of the requested variable may also be one of these. Right? So, for example, if you are taking input and you are requesting an integer, but if you're expecting an integer to be passed, if that variable is missing, null. If it's not an integer, for example, if the client passed potato instead of the integer, you get false. And if the integer itself was 0, you get a 0. But that 0 could mean a success condition rather than a failure condition. So, if all you're using is weak equality, you can't tell the difference between those three cases. The way that you pick out which case you're in is using an if statement. That if statement needs to use strict equality, or else you will all of your matches will hit on the first case it finds in those cases, which means in the best case scenario, you will treat a null as if it were a false. In the worst case scenario, valid data will flunk out of the system. Does that make sense? Side note, switch cases in PHP use weak equality, not strong equality. So if you want to use strict equality in PHP, you must use an if statement. You cannot use a switch case, which is a shame because switch cases are lovely and fun. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. Weak versus strong equality will be on the test. You should write that down. Will be on the test. Circle. So.
Sorry, what did you say would be on the test?
Weak versus strong equality. So, most of these points are things we've already talked about or things that are trivial. I will speak very briefly about associative arrays. It's a concept that you folks haven't had that much exposure to yet. You guys did objects in JavaScript, right? Even just a little bit? Objects in JavaScript, yeah? I got one thumb, okay, a couple of, all right. So, ever so briefly, basically what an object in JavaScript allows you to do is it allows you to map between a string and some other value. So you can say something like apples gets 3, oranges get 7, bananas get 0. Something like that. In PHP, this is termed an associative array. It is called an associative array because, number one, PHP likes to think of itself as having arrays even though it actually has lists. And number two, we are associating keys with values. Key value associations. That's why it's called an associative array. In formal mathematics, this would be called a mapping. You are mapping one set to another. All right. Yes, yes, yes. So let's have some fun with if statements, shall we? Oh, wait, okay. Let me back up just a moment. So we all know that triple equals is our strong or strict equality operation in PHP. You also have available bang with 2 equal signs. You replace the first equal sign with the exclamation point. This is strict inequality. follows the same rules as equality. It's basically the same thing as if you said x triple equals y, this, and then inverted it, this is the same as saying x not equals y strictly. These are equivalent. All right? The thing that you don't have in PHP is something like this. You do not have strict greater than and strict less than. Although, honestly, I have been in situations where it would be convenient to have such a thing. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist in PHP. Sorry. I do always, though, find it somewhat amusing when I get a test and someone has used, triple equals greater than or triple equals less than. Like, not amusing in like I get to fail you kind of a way, but like amusing in a daw kind of way. Because some people, I think, to avoid having to understand the difference between weak and strict equality, will use strict equality for everything, right? And just throw in the extra exclamation, the extra equal sign, and ignore the fact that that there is even weak equality in these types of languages. And honestly, not a bad heuristic. Like as these types of heuristics go, not the worst one I've seen. Because if you can't, if you don't trust yourself to play with matches, the best thing to do is to just leave them in the cupboard, right? But it also kind of means that you're avoiding having to understand the difference between weak and strong equality. So, to some extent, it's still preferable to understand both and be able to use both contextually. The advantage, remind us, of using strict equality, or weak equality, is that you can do something like that and it works the way that you expect it to with implicit string conversions. Now, there are many points where you will want some functionality like that in PHP because regardless what data type you might think your incoming packet information has, it always has string. So even if you're asking, or even if the response packet is supposed to contain all integers, those integers are encoded in strings. So you will be receiving strings, you will be getting lots of string data, and being able to do that is fun and convenient, so long as you're not shooting yourself in the foot by doing so. Make sense? So good? All good? Yes, yes, yes? Okay. Incidentally, now that it has come to it, I might as well tell you about my policy when it comes to marking tests. So some of you, I say this to sort of, reduce anxieties, because I said the word test already in class a couple of times. Your tests will be pen and paper tests, right? The test and the exam. I am not expecting you to have exact and precise syntax on a written test. If you forget a semicolon, you will not lose marks. If you don't have your curly braces matched up perfectly, you won't lose marks. That being said, there are some places where a small syntactic difference means a lot, and in particular, means a lot to the question I'm asking you. So, for example, if the entire thrust of the question was to test you on weak versus strict equality in this manner, and you use the wrong one of these, I think it's fair to documux, right? Because not like, if you mess that up, that means that you have used the wrong equality where the other one was called for. The whole point of the question is to test you to see whether you know the difference between the two. So that's a fair point where you would lose some marks over a small syntax thing, right? But in general, if the question is unrelated to strong versus weak strong versus weak equality, and it's not like, you know, one of those specific points where I hammered it in, like this really does make a difference right here, and I've taught it in class a lot, and you will have tripped yourself up on assignments and that sort of thing, I will hold you to it. But like if it's just general code and you're flip-flopping between the two, I'm not going to be that concerned about it, right? Does that make sense? Do we feel this is a fair testing policy? Okay, good. The testing policy summarized is, I know that people, when writing code by hand, will make mistakes. You know, it's kind of like, where's an eraser? You know, if this is the set of mistakes you make on a test, right? There is a subset that will lose you marks. I think it's with one O. There's a subset of them that will lose you marks, and these are normally related to question. Right? Cool. So, all right, so we've talked about double equals in an if statement. We've talked about triple equals in an if statement. Now let's confuse things further and talk about just a single equal sign inside of an if statement. So, if it's not inside of an if statement, what does the single equal sign do?
Just assigns the variable.
Very good. It is an assignment operation. This does not change when it's in an if statement. Java, blessed be its compiler, will slap you on the wrists if you try this, right? In Java, you are not permitted to perform assignment inside of an if statement guard condition. But in PHP, you can. Consider the following code, or consider the following program. On line 5, we are assigning the value of 10 to the variable x. On line 7, what we think we are doing is comparing the value of x to 5. What are we actually doing?
Setting x to 5.
That's right, we are assigning the value of x. Perhaps down here we'll just do that so we can see the value. Perhaps I'll throw a break statement in there too. So I know that in HTML they told you never to use breaks, and that breaks are only for poetry. But here, it's really convenient because basically what the break statements are allowing us to do is treat a web page as if it's a console output, right? So that's what we're doing. So we are performing an assignment operation. When we print x, we get 5 instead of 10. But here's the question. Why are we getting true? Why is it true that x is being assigned to the value of 5? Any ideas? Sorry?
We just changed it into a statement.
Yes, we just assigned the value of 5 to it. So that, are you saying that because the operation succeeded, we get true? Okay, so one theory, operation success or failure. Any other theories? Yes.
X equals 5 is just the value of x. And then it's like if 5 or something.
That's an alternative theory, yes. So let's run it, yes, at the back.
Oh, it's a non-zero value, so it's true now and not false, because you gave us 5?
Yes. So let's test something, and I'll show you an edge case where you're not correct. So if we assign it 0, you can see that we get false, yet the operation succeeded because x after that is equal to 0. So what you and you have said is exactly the case. What is actually happening here is that assignment statements have a return value. The return value of the assignment statement is the value that has been assigned. So, when you assign 0 to x, the return value of that assignment statement is 0. 0, if given all by itself inside of the condition, will also produce a false, whereas any non-zero value will produce a true. So you may be saying to yourself, okay, sure, this seems kind of dumb. Can I not just avoid this problem entirely by following the convention as given in Java? And again, that's not a bad heuristic. It's actually, if I could make it so that every programmer's goal was to program as if they were programming in a strongly statically typed language like Java, wherever they were, regardless where they were, I think that the code of the world would be improved by that. If you programmed JavaScript as if it were Java, that would improve JavaScript. That's why TypeScript exists, for example. If you program PHP as if it were Java, that improves PHP, improves readability, improves portability, just everything. But when people have their own little languages, they like to work their way into the little, advantages you can take of your situation. And this is a fairly common construct in PHP. I'll do this in pseudocode. This is fairly common. You'll see this a lot in existing code bases. So if Q is equal to operation that could fail, typically that operation will return something like false on failure. And something like the data being returned or something like that on success. You can then run some code dependent on success here, or some code handling failure here. Make sense? So this is something you will encounter in the wild with reasonable frequency in PHP, unfortunately. So you have to keep an eye on that assignment statement. Make sense? Here's one more, which is a fun little trick. So, let's say that we have an if statement which is testing a couple of conditions, A, B, and C, or 3 conditions, A, B, and C, using AND. If we take a look at the truth table for the AND operation, you guys have seen truth tables before, right? Yeah, good. There's a lot of people coming in and out of my class right now. Okay, are you going to the bathroom?
Yes.
And then I forgive you. It's just constant though, it's very distracting.
We just had 2-hour class.
Oh yeah, no break?
No break.
Yeah. Okay. So, as we all know, for the Boolean AND operation, we have true in this case and false in all others. So, the C programming language does this as well. Lots of programming languages do this that you might not be aware of. If the first one comes out false, is there any point in executing B or C?
No.
No. One false at the front means that the whole thing will be false regardless what B and C are. So most compilers won't execute them. They just throw them away. Now this is interesting because what that allows you to do is to make like these conditionals dependent on this one having been run first in cases where this affects state. Like that's what this is doing, right? It's affecting state. You guys know what state means, right? You guys have heard that term for it? State? I see some nods, but how many people have never heard the term state referred to with human, okay, or with memory systems? So, state is basically just a term for all of the values in the memory used by the program, right? So, when I say there are some operations which change state and some operations which do not change state, right? So an assignment operation changes state, but a regular double or triple equals here does not change state, right? Merely executing an expression does not change state, but assignment at the end does. So what you can do is you can set up you can set things up such that, here's a good example. So, division by 0. What is division by 0? It's a dirty crime, that's what it is. So the computer doesn't know how to handle division by zero, right? Which means any time that you are performing any division with a variable on the bottom, that is a potentially an operation that could crash the whole program. So, consider this. Let's say we have a variable q, assigned it a value of 10. If q is not equal to 0 and 100 divided by q is greater than 3. Something like that, something numeric. Echo, yes. Else, something, something went wrong. So if we execute this, there we go. It executes that q is equal to 10, so q is not equal to 0. We pass. 100 divided by 10 is 10, which is greater than 3, so we're good. If I increase q to 100, we get something went wrong, because what's 100 divided by 100? Is 1 greater than 3?
No.
So we hit the false branch. Now, here's an interesting thing. And I really hope this works. Aha! It did work. So, consider this. Pardon me. Q is not equal to 0. Q is equal to 0. This comes out. If Q is set to 0 and I test to see if Q is not equal to 0, false. Good. I have false and something. Under these circumstances, executing Q as 0 would result in, if I allowed Q to be 0, what have I done? Better question, let's just test it. Let's remove this. Division by 0 error. But if I put that in, no division by 0 error. Why no division by 0 error?
Because it's not gonna run.
Yeah, this statement here, it's not even that it's, we don't care. It's that it's not even executed. The PHP interpreter drops it without executing it, which means the error that would have arisen if it were executed, because that's a 0 division, doesn't happen. This guards that from having errors. Any questions? This is also the sort of thing that you see sometimes in PHP. Because of all of the programming languages, PHP has an extremely inelegant way of handling warnings and errors. You'll notice that with that warning, it literally just dropped a bunch of ugly text inside of my web page. You can imagine what that would be like if that were something more important and not just plain text, right? So yeah. Does that make sense? You guys feel like you're learning? Always my hope is that people learn. So, if this weren't bad enough, weak typing, the implementation of it is dependent on the version of PHP that you are using. On our server, CS Unix, we are running 7.2.24. In PHP versions prior to version 8, this code, 0 is weakly equal to PHP, evaluates to false. But in versions 8 and up, it evaluates to true. Now, basically, what this means is you probably shouldn't try to take PHP that was written for version 7 and port it to version 8. Because this is the type of thing that introduces very hard to detect bugs. Right? Yeah. So there are languages where version number is like, yeah, you know, version number or whatever. Then there are languages like PHP where it actually pretty strongly matters that you need to be aware of your version number. Okay? Yes. Okay. Okay, we're gonna change gears a little bit here. We're going to talk a little bit about the quote-unquote one-page application. So the PHP tag can be mixed into pre-existing HTML code in a way that PHP believes is easy and convenient. Let's make a new file. New file, call it onepageapp.php. There we go. First, note that you can insert your HTML shebang using the same shortcut key. So VS Code at least is aware that PHP files are intended to contain HTML code. So, in order to do this demonstration, I will require some ducks. There is a duck. We shall call him duck1. Save him. So if you're following along at home or in the classroom, please save your image files to your htdocs/week3 folder. htdocs week 3. This shall be doc1 dot what is it? Or just doc1 dot jfif. Horrible. How are you supposed to pronounce it? It's like doesn't have enough vowels. JPEG. That's easy. jfif? Is it jfif? Who knows? Cayuga ducks, also a very handsome looking animal. Save image. Duck2. There we go. Wood duck. An extremely interesting looking duck. Duck 3, duck J5. There we go. We actually get wood ducks in this part of the world, interestingly. And let's see here. Here's a absolute cornucopia of different duck types. Communications biology, let's see. Can't really read it though, so yeah. So we'll have this duck. There we go. And he shall be a PNG. So, we have our images. The object of this web page is to produce one where we can randomly substitute one of these 3 images, or one of these 4 images, in PHP. So, the first thing that we'll need is we'll need a PHP block above the header, which allows us to set values. There we go. The next thing which is useful is an array to contain all of our file names. Now, all of you Windows users beware. In Windows the default is for them to hide your file extensions. If you write yourself a little array, duck1, duck2, duck3, duck4, these are not image files. They will not be loadable. You need the file extension, as the file extension completes the file name. So, you must go to View, File, Name, Extensions. There you go. So now we know that duck1 is a .jfif, duck2 is a .jfif, duck3 is a .jpeg, and duck4 is .png. Probably because of the transparency layer. Now, we wish to insert an image into our website. So let's add an image, create a source attribute, and now we want to very sneakily drop in one of our elements of the above array. PHP echo, close PHP, echoing ducks at random number between 0 and 3. Rand 0 to 3 generates a random number, random integer, 0, 1, 2, or 3. Technically speaking, if you wanted to make this a little bit more flexible, you could throw in count ducks -1. That way, it dynamically expands or contracts the size of the requested indexes according to the size of the array. So, PHP will calculate, okay, so this is the order of operations. First, it calculates how many ducks there are. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 goes in here. -1 is to account for the zero indexing. We're going from random number from 0 to 3. That calculates one of those numbers. We then substitute that into array access. That pulls out one of these strings. That gets echoed. And the final result once I target the correct app, one page app.php, we get a random duck each time with a certain amount of repetition. That's a little large, so width is equal to 50 pixels. So, let's take a quick look at the underlying HTML code. To view the HTML source, which has been sent from the server, we of course right-click, inspect, and there she is. Duck2.jfif. You can see, as we reload the page, that we are getting each of those file names randomly. But here's a question. Where is the PHP, where are the PHP tags? I put them in, where are they? Anybody? Where did the PHP go? Yes?
You said before that they don't appear on the web page internally they turn in HTML and it's just HTML, right?
Yes. So whenever you have a PHP tag encountered in code, whatever that PHP echoes, it does an in-place substitution in the file and puts that in the place of the PHP tag. So, here, this PHP tag from here to here is being replaced with what has been echoed, which is one of those 4 strings. And it's character perfect on this. If I were to insert any additional, well, I'll just do spaces. If I were to put some spaces in here, you'll notice these spaces also appear in our file name. Now, JavaScript is being kind to us here. The system is accounting for the fact that there are spare spaces hanging out around the name that we actually want. It is gobbling the white space for us. Much of the time you won't be so lucky, right? You can think of many instances where a spare space in the wrong place can completely destroy a program. Because, once again, in programming, every character counts. So, it's an in-place substitution to the extent that it will perfectly preserve the contents of the file, except for the beginning and the opening, the beginning and the ending tags. Does that make sense? Any questions? So, let's try something a little different. Let's say, just for the sake of interest, I wanted to generate some kind of repetitive content here. Let's say I don't want just one image of the duck. I wanted 10, 20, 50, 100,003 images of this duck, or images of ducks, pulled randomly. To do that by hand would be, to coin a phrase, a pain. But we have a general purpose programming language at our disposal. We can write some code to do what we want. So, let us create a variable n. 10,003 is the value of our variable. We wish this segment to be repeated 10,003 times. We do this using an ordinary for loop. For loop in the regular way that you expect to see them so far. Opening curly brace up here, closing curly brace down here. Something you may note about this. What looks funny about this?
There's two open closes.
Very good. The opening and the closing curly brace are not in the same PHP code block. There are in fact 3 PHP code blocks going on here. So, will it work? They say, well, probably, because it's being done as an example. There you have it. That is a lot of ducks. 10,003 of them, to be precise. And did you notice how fast that was, too? Let me tell you, it would not be that fast if it had to fetch those imagery sources every single time it did that. Right? If you were doing this with JavaScript, what you would likely do is you would ask the server for a random duck image 10,000 times, which means that 10,000 images would need to be transported to your computer. In theory, I guess you could preload them, ask for all of the available images and then randomize them on the client, but that kind of, at some point, where to randomize it was a design decision, right? if it's been chosen that you should randomize that decision on the server side, then the client needs to remain agnostic to that to some extent. So what this is doing is it's literally just generating an HTML page where these resources have been requested, these 4 resources have been requested. It just so happens about 10,000 times between all of them. Which means that on first encountering each of these images, the browser takes it, caches it, and then anytime it's asked for again, it just brings out the cached version, right? Rather than having to go back to the server each time for it. So we have drastically reduced the amount of internet traffic that we need to perform the same operation as we might have in JavaScript, assuming that the randomization still needs to occur on the server. Does that make sense? This is the power of PHP. So, any questions? No questions at all? Not even one tiny little doubt? Everybody understands this perfectly? So everybody will get 100% on the test? Question?
Yeah, I did. Thanks.
You are missing a semicolon.
Ostras, tío, no sé qué.
Pero es un esto de close tabs.
Can I show me your code? Oh yeah, you're running the wrong. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it 100%. So, if you want a more technical explanation for how this is possible, when the pieces of the loop are spread across different portions of different PHP code blocks. Normally in a programming language like Java, we are used to thinking of if statements and loops as being kind of monolithic, right? Indivisible things. You just put one down and you don't think about it that much. All control flow constructs ultimately are expressible in terms of one controls construct. Does anybody know what the CPU itself uses to control the execution of a program? Any guesses? No, not a socket. It's a CPU command. It features heavily in assembly languages.
CMD.
Hmm?
CMD.
CMD is you mean the application that you use to run like MS-DOS?
Yeah.
Nope. I'm talking about CPU operations like add and subtract. There's one that allows you to control the execution of a program.
Control. Like
Nope. It?
call?
Call? No.
Is it
Hmm?
Move,
Which, sorry?
move.
Move? That's closer, but move is for moving values into and out of memory. It's not the operation I'm looking for. Not get, but you've got the right first letter. I'm actually kind of happy that nobody knows what this is. Not global. Go to! There we go! Yes! The go to statement. So, ultimately, all of your fancy control structures, like if statements and loops, they all break down in terms of go to. Go to is an operation, so inside of the CPU, you have your program, it's listed by lines, right? Or, you have a number of CPU operations that are listed by lines. You also have a register inside of the CPU that tells you where you are in the program. This is called the program pointer. The goto operation is simply writing a number into the program pointer. So I want to go to line 17. All right, write 17 into the program counter, and then we are on line 17. That's what a go-to statement is. Would you be surprised to know that Java supports go-tos? You should never, 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 never use them, though. Excuse me. Go-tos are considered extreme bad practice. Basically, like with a go-to, you can actually do things like jump in and out of like functions and methods in ways that you're not supposed to be able to. Go-tos, you can break things very easily, and if you use them to any, like even a very small amount of them, you turn your program into spaghetti code. And the term spaghetti code actually was first used to describe programs that use too many go-to statements. And this was back in the day when go-to was all you had. So, so if we conceptualize, like that all being said, if we think about this program in terms of go-to statements, it actually starts to make sense. So when you start a loop, you're putting down a little label for a go-to saying, okay, loop start here, right? Label, loop start. Then you have a conditional jump to something labeled loop end, right? So if the condition comes out false, jump to loop end. That will skip everything in here, right? Basically, executing stuff, writing stuff is turned off until we hit loop end tag. That's what these curly braces are actually. You wondered what a curly brace, have you ever wondered what a curly brace actually is? Go-to labels. That's what they actually are. So when this condition comes out true, it says, okay, just run execution normally, runs execution normally, encounters this, executes it. In the case of PHP, executing HTML just means printing HTML until it hits this guy. This guy tells it to go to the top. So it go-tos loop start. And then it retests the condition, and that's how a loop actually works. And so, if you think of this in terms of tags being placed into the source code, rather than in terms of like continuous control structures, this starts to make sense. You can also do this with if statements. Once we get through the course of it, and we have talked about both sessions and databases, one of the things that we will be doing, we will be creating a login page, login databases. Should the user be presented with a login page if they are logged in? Wow, is anybody paying attention at all? Yes?
Yeah.
If they're already logged in, should they be presented with a login page? Yeah. No! In fact, they should just be taken to the thing they want to see. You can use if statements in here to, for example, request login if login is required, but not print a request for login if login is not required. Login being required or not being required is something that you set up in this top material, or something that you test for up in that top material. So, does that make sense? Any questions? I promise this course will get interesting, but we do need to slog through all of this, all of these sorts of. You guys got to get a feel for the language, you know. Otherwise, you're just gonna keep stubbing your toe on these things. Okay. So, let's talk strings. New topic, fresh page in notebook. So, what is the difference between single and double quotes in Python? No difference. Yes, that's correct. Ostensibly, that's correct. The actual thing that people use the difference for is if you have, you know, a string like Professor Moore is a fun professor, right? If you have these sarcasm quotes inside of the string that you're trying to quote, if you use double quotes for that, that's going to be a problem because the compiler will interpret this as being your string, right? And then this is like variable names, I guess, except you didn't declare them, so that would fail on there, right? And then this is also a string. In Python, and by the way, in JavaScript as well, if you replace these with the single quotes, everything's fine, right? The alternative to that is you can produce quotes that way as well by escaping them inside of the double quotes. And it works the other way around too. If this is the single quotes, then you would require double quotes on the outside, right? But in general, like from an output perspective, single quotes and double quotes mean the same thing. They are both a string. How about in Java?
Difference.
Yes. You know what the difference is?
Single quotes are used for single characters.
Very good. So in Java, a single quote represents a single character, whereas a double quoted string is a string, an actual string. And this is a distinction that most languages which are statically typed will hold, because statically typed languages tend to have a character type, whereas dynamically typed languages tend not to have a character type. Like, for example, the way that Python deals with characters is to consider any string containing only one character as a character string, which is, you know, for people who like to think rigorously about programs like myself, you're confusing the underlying data type with the data structure that contains it, which is they're not the same idea, right? You wouldn't confuse an integer array with an integer, so why would you confuse a string with a character? But, you know, the answer, of course, is for convenience. So, Would anybody care to hazard a guess what the difference between single and double quotes is in PHP? Does anybody already know it? No? Yes? No? Maybe so? No? Audience interaction portion? Yes, sir?
I think in JavaScript it was the one that you do inline variable names. I don't know if that works the same here.
Inline variable
The
names.
thing where you have the fancy curly bracket and the fancy dollar sign, and you have the variable instead of doing like a word and then a plus the variable name and then more words.
Are you talking about the way that strings are concatenated?
Yeah.
Yes. You are close to the mark. Yeah, close to the mark. So, I want a better marker for this. This is a half-dead marker. All right. So, in PHP, double quotes means interpreted string. Single quotes means uninterpreted string. So you might be asking yourself, that doesn't seem to clear things up at all. So, in both cases we're talking about strings, but the question is, what are we interpreting? And the answer is, we are interpreting variables. Interpreted strings interpret variable values. Contain variables, take out their values, insert them into the string. Single quotes do not interpret variables. They leave them alone. They say, okay, this is just a string, just these characters. So, another way of thinking of an uninterpreted string is as a exact literal. It's exactly the literal that it says it is. So, going back to example 1. Let's see what the difference is between these two. There we go. So, line 28, echo with the double quotes, break x. Gives us 4, which is the assigned value of x. Using the exact same line of code, the only difference being using single quotes instead of double quotes, we get $x. Question?
For the second one, what does it show on the inspect? Like when you inspect it? Or does it not show anything?
A fair question. $x. So, here's an important thing to understand about this, though. It is an exact literal string that is still being interpreted as HTML, right? Just because I've used the single quotes here does not mean that I'm expecting the break tag to print as open open BR close, right? this is still being interpreted as an HTML tag. Does that make sense? Good. So, the fact that PHP allows this is actually sort of popularly considered to be the origin of the SQL injection attack. Injection attacks work by some person who's not very nice writing some code which then gets injected into somebody else's code. It executes and does something malicious. I'm not checking X here before running it. Right? So, I'm going to show you how inserting malicious code works on this end. We won't worry too much about how it gets received into the server right now. This is how malicious code can enter into your final output. Anything here gets interpreted as HTML. So that might be innocent, like something like that, where all I'm doing is I'm putting strong in there for a little emphasis. Right? You can see the tag has been executed rather than being printed. What if we have something a little more nefarious? How about a script tag? So, my variable y contains a script element, alert box. You've been hacked, son. I take this y variable, I print it I print it on the web page without checking anything first. This gets interpreted as HTML. HTML means that the the JavaScript is executed. Now, you're just going to have to take my word for it that this is bad enough, right? Getting an alert box to run on somebody else's web page is a sufficient proof that you don't, it's a sufficient proof of the security vulnerability that I'm not going to go any further than this most of the time when I'm demonstrating security vulnerabilities. If you can run that, you can run any JavaScript. Any JavaScript includes loading outside JavaScript resources. It includes, possibly stealing cookies, right? Perhaps stealing session validation cookies, right? That's bad enough. And you'll notice also, because nothing was printed, this is actually a blank break here, right? This whole thing gets interpreted differently in the HTML code. You can take a look. See? Just have our script element hanging out there. Any questions? So the question is, how might a string like that come into existence? Where did it come from? And, you know, it's kind of silly of me to claim that this is hacking because, you know, I have written the variable into the PHP my very self. You know, the PHP is hacking itself, right? It's not really hacking yet. Don't worry, we'll get there. What if the contents of this variable originated in the client? Right? What if this came from the client? If you take any string that a client gives you and echo it to your web page without checking it, you're done. You're hacked. That's it. Yes?
You mean like maybe if someone is trying to log in and we're trying to echo like hello username and then they put in the string or something and then
That's enough.
that's
Yep.
that's how I was thinking it was. in my-
Yep. Like, if your website is so vulnerable that someone can enter a script element into a username, into a little username box, and it executes, you have a pretty vulnerable website. But yes, that is like how you hack in the complete absence of any security procedure whatsoever. But yes, that is a valid way to hack. Just try entering a script element into it.
You wouldn't have access to it any inspector would.
Well, no. See, if you're modifying the code in the inspector, you're only modifying your own local copy, right? So this is another one, right? You can test for vulnerabilities through search. You know the little search panes? A lot of the time, it used to be the case that when you entered like a search term, it would repeat your search term like in the search, right? It's like found 10 results for your search term, right? Well, if they're not sanitizing your search term, boom. Now, that's not quite sufficient. For an XSS attack, you do need someone to click on a bad link, normally. But we're starting to dip our toes into very deep water. Make sense? So, check it before you print it. And never trust the client. Never trust the client. Never trust the client. The client is always trying to hack you. Never trust the client. None of them for any reason. Ever. Never trust a single client, ever. Alright, get out of here. One second.